Musto0063 back for the continuation of the Mega Man Wily Wars playthrough, and it's time to stop monkeying around. So let's go after the leader of the Genesis unit, Buster Rod G. Now, as you can see, each time you play a stage, you're given the opportunity to select a different set of weapons and items. You're not stuck with the ones you chose when you started the game. So if you decide something sucks, you can replace it. Maybe you accidentally selected top spin, I don't know. Now, rather like with the last video, I'd like to go off on a little bit of a tangent here and go into story mode once again. Since, with apologies, spoiler alert, I will have another chance to talk about the stage a bit later. So I want to tell you all the story of how I came to own this game. I actually found this game in a video game rental shop. We're talking way back in the mid-1990s here, before the era of DVDs or the internet taking over. And while it didn't really register with me at the time, again, no mass internet, that is almost in itself quite astounding. This game is pretty rare. I think in the Americas it wasn't even released in cartridge form. It may have been available as a download or something, but whatever. It sounds like there are a lot of copies out there in the world. And I'll return to this in just a moment, but yeah, specifically to my story. Yeah, rental shop in my previous little hometown somehow had a copy of this game. I'd love to know how they ended up with one. But being a huge Mega Man fan, I snapped up the chance to rent the game for like a 5-day period. So what with NES Mega Man games also being quite uncommon in the UK, I'd never previously played Mega Man 1, so I was thrilled that I'd finally get the chance to play it. I did own Mega Man 2 on the NES, and I'd go on to own Mega Man 4, but although I'd played Mega Man 3, I'd never owned it on the NES. I borrowed it from a friend at primary or junior school. So I played through all 3 games, and was obviously elated to discover that I'd unlocked a new game I'd never even heard about, Wily Tower. I went through that, and just overall loved the whole collection, and was disappointed to have to return it after those 5 days. About 6 months later or so, when I happened to be back at the rental shop, I asked whether the game was available to rent again, and the guy on the counter said they'd actually sold it to someone. I didn't know that was actually something I could have done, but was pretty bummed to hear that I was unlikely to ever play the game again. And again, this is obviously well before the GameCube era when things like the Mega Man Anniversary Collection etc. came out, so at the time, yeah, I did think that I'd never see it again. It must have been at least 2 years later. My dad had gone out to run some errands, and he came home with a copy of the game. He happened to pop into the same rental shop and seen the game on the shelf. Apparently, the person who previously bought it had returned it. It was the same copy, and not another version. My dad knew how much I'd liked the game, and bought it there and then. So I then owned Mega Man The Wily Wars. So, infinite thanks not only to my dad, but also to whatever moron returned the game in the first place. Worst decision ever. Now, back to the point I was making about this game being rare. Apparently, it is extremely sought after by collectors. Prior to recording this voiceover, I had a look at what this game was being sold for on eBay. The price varies seller to seller, but the highest price the game was going for was $600 for the one game. Now, I'm from England, Britain, the UK, so I like to deal in pounds sterling. Not that I can't appreciate dollar value, but still. That's roughly, with an exchange rate of 1.65 as at January 2014, £360. Again, for the one game. Now, in dollar terms, we're talking more expensive than the cost of a brand new Wii U or PS4 or Xbox One console. Yes, console. That isn't the case in the UK, at least with Xbox One or PS4, because they cost more, but hopefully that gives some gravity to the quite ridiculously sounding price that the Wily Wars is apparently selling for on eBay, solely due to the rareness of the game. Now, I'm going to pause briefly here because I'm going to be breaking through this lower right hand wall here with Crash Bomb and showing you what's on the other side. And by the way, the weapon clearly says CL there, not CR, and I believe that's to do with the fact that Crash Man is known as Clash Man in Japan, something about R's and L's, hence the CL. But since in the game, or the European version at least, he's named Crash Man, that really should have been fixed. Whether it was just laziness in not changing the weapon select text from the Japanese spelling, I don't know. Regardless, there's a hothead up here, about here from Mega Man 2, quick stage, not heats, and we get the reward of an E-Tank if we take him out. And unlike the one up in Hyperstorm H's level, this time for some reason I bothered to actually go collect it. I don't really know why I bothered, since I consider myself sufficiently good at the game to believe I should never need to use one. But just to quickly return to the whole costing rarity situation, yeah, I do feel rather privileged to actually own a copy of this game. Personally, I don't think it's something I'd ever sell, at least certainly not until I'm past the point in my life that I don't keep enjoying Mega Man, or gaming in general. I'm certainly not in need of the money, and from a sentimental point of view, however little I go back and play it, I gotta confess, it'd probably be something I'd miss, should it ever be gone. So, story time over, and wouldn't you know it, that brings us nicely to the boss, Buster Rod G. Now again, with no boss rush to speak of, now seems like a decent enough time to talk about weapon weaknesses. He's insanely weak to both Hyper Bomb and Hard Knuckle. As with Hyperstorm H, he actually spends a decent amount of time just standing in one place, so Bomb's weapon is a decent enough choice. I however prefer Hard's weapon just because I can keep a little bit more distance from him, and with that long rod of his, that's probably the preferable option. And again, I probably should also say that a fully charged atomic fire shot, Heat's man's weapon, does the most damage, but as I said before, it takes so long to charge, and you only get to fire 2 before the weapon meter is drained, that I wouldn't recommend that option. So if you're not going Buster only, either Hyper Bomb or Hard Knuckle are the standout choices. And as you saw there, this time we don't destroy the Robot Master, he manages to escape. More on that to come later. So again, no teasing whether or not a perfect run was attained. I do have quite a lot of backstory etc. that I wanted to talk about with this game, so that's what I spent much of the Let's Play doing. But yeah, if you've stuck around till now, hope you enjoy the perfect run. So we are once again back in glorious colour. Buster Rod G has a very forest-themed stage, or at least that's how I always think about it. And some relaxing music if I do say so myself. Rather tranquil setting, you know, if you ignore the abundance of enemies all over the place. So that first room with the Hammer Joe and the War Shooters shouldn't pose too many problems, just pay close attention to the direction of Mega Man 1 style War Shooters pellets are travelling. A couple of helicopter mets from Needle Stage, but if you shoot them before they have a chance to rise up and fire any shots at you, then nothing to worry about. A lot of the rest of the stage has a Snake Man feel to it, starting with this cloud platform section. The clouds are actually far less buggy than the NES version, and I don't recall ever having been forced off the side if they spawn in while you're standing on the floor, so that's a plus. More Hammer Joes. Now again, try not to be too greedy in taking them out, as jumping into a hammer is not recommended. Having said that, I did manage to take out that second of 2 Joes in the one cycle, which I'm immensely proud of. A fan thing to Mega Man 2, Air Stage, but no opportunity to buggily scroll this one off the screen, so drop down to a lower area and take it out. The next screen is a pain, you need to be prepared, and ideally you'd want to hit one of the bladers when you drop down to give yourself an easier time, but I missed all 3. Having done so, I was then reliant on taking out the bottom 2 when they were rather close to me. A lone top generator from Who Else Top Stage, but the platform positioning on this screen makes it more or less a non-issue. Now this is the biggest single pain in the neck screen of the stage. The Pippies and robotic rabbits are always in your face, and avoiding everything is very tricky. Get good at hitting the Pippy eggs or you're likely to be in trouble. I say likely, but if you're as skillful as me here, then you can still dodge everything. No, skillful would have been hitting the egg, not having to frantically recover the situation. One technique you could employ, which I'm trying to put into practice here, is to have the Pippy scrolling from the left side of the screen, because if the egg does break and release all the baby Pippy, they're slightly less in your way. But regardless, it's the hectic area with plenty happening on screen. The rabbits will frequently divert your focus from the Pippy, or in some cases even block the birds off so you can't hit them, and that's just plain nasty. Make it through and you're well and truly back in Snake's domain. 3 small snakies to deal with, but they fire a lot slower than NES Mega Man 3, so you don't have to be precise with your own timing or your anticipation of when they'll fire at you. From tiny snakies to a giant snaky. Same deal as when you fought him in Mega Man 3. 10 hits to the face will do the trick. Next up are some pickaxe throwers from Mega Man 1, Guts' stage, and you'll definitely want to take out the nearer one of the 2 before either stops to pause. If they do pause, you'll find that the pickaxes start to get thrown at you out of sync as opposed to nicely in time. That's exactly how and why I got hit during the Let's Play version. Ugh. Now here's an example of the jumping fooling me that I mentioned last video. I'm edging up to the spikes because I'm worried my jump will only just clear them, but I clear them by such a distance it made me look ridiculous. I swear though, if NES mechanics or physics whatever were in place, I wouldn't have landed anywhere near as far over to the left. Last corridor, and we have some Digger Mets from top and hard stages. Again, 3 shots to the Met will destroy them. Bubble Bats from Wood stage, as non-threatening as ever to be honest. And a couple of pop-up Mets, I think from Guts' stage. Just be careful with these. They'll likely be able to get off a volley of pellets, so move as far back to the left as you need to safely avoid them. You wouldn't want to get hit so close to the Robot Master. So here we are again at Buster Rod G. Like Hyperstorm H, his attack pattern also works on a cycle, and he will always do the same moves in the exact same order, although there is actually some slight variability within the moves. Firstly, he will extend his rod out to try to poke you. If you're standing at the opposite edge of the screen, it won't reach you though. Secondly, in what isn't even an attack frankly, he'll spin his rod round, and the only thing it does is deflect your attacks. Thirdly, he'll jump to the middle of the screen and try to once again poke you by extending out his rod. You can either slide along the floor to dodge him, or it's my preferred strategy, stand in the corner, the same one you would have previously been in, and jump over the rod when it's fully extended. Fourthly, he'll jump back to the corner he was previously in and create copies of himself which bounce across the screen and rematerialise in the opposite corner of the screen. Lastly, he'll spin the rod around again, a repeat of his second move. The pattern then repeats, him starting with the ground level poking. It can be a little tricky to hit Buster Rod G as the ground poking will deflect your bullets, so you need to try to perform tiny jumps and shoot at a level that's high enough to travel above the rod but low enough to actually hit him. With regard to the jump poking attack, the tell that he's going to extend his rod is the movement of his hand, so that's how I know when to jump. The number of times he tries to poke you during this attack varies, as does the order of the multiple copies bouncing from one side of the screen to the other. Because of this, I'd recommend staying underneath him as he's forming, and only start to move to the opposite corner of the screen when the fifth and final copy's got out of your way. One copy is the real version, and you can only get one hit in on that copy, but the others are fakes, and hitting those won't do any damage to him. It's one of the longer and more drawn out Robot Master fights in the classic series for the reason I've already said, in so much that you don't always have good opportunities to actually hit him. But if you stay calm, don't worry about the fact that it's going to take a little bit of time, because he has a clear, ordered set of attacks. You shouldn't ever be surprised by anything he does. Of course, we're robbed, for the time being anyway, of the satisfaction of actually killing him, but good things will come to those who wait. In an ideal world, and certainly in a standard Let's Play, I would have saved Buster Rod G for last, simply for the quote-unquote shock of him not actually being destroyed and living to fight another day. But, as always, I'm doing these stages in the order in which I perfect run them, and certainly at the time, I believe that this was not going to be the hardest to beat. It took 1 hour to achieve a successful perfect run, and what with there being, in my opinion, a few very tricky sections in this stage, I'm not at all disappointed with that. A total of 21 outtakes, with 2 of those actually on Buster Rod G. To be honest, almost all of the stage outtakes were on the 3 bladers screen, as you get dropped in a very confined space and have to take out at least 2 of them rather quickly, or you're more or less stuffed, and the screen with the robotic rabbits and Pippi. As I described, there's so much to pay attention to in that screen. The rabbits take a significant number of hits to destroy, during which time Pippi's likely to have flown in and may or may not have been able to drop an egg because you were too busy dealing with Mr. Rabbit. Trust me, that section is a huge pain. As for Buster Rod G, the fact that he has an ordered move pattern is a considerable help, but it won't matter if you try to rush things and move to the opposite side of the screen while the final copy of him bounces across the screen and just so happens to bounce the furthest it can. And not once, twice. Yep, I didn't learn my lesson and screwed up a second time in the exact same manner. There is enough of a delay between the final copy bouncing up and Buster Rod G dropping to the floor, so wait before you make your move and you'll be absolutely fine. The Rabbit and Pippi screen is the principal reason for my not too pissed off but equally not too mellow mood. 2, at least in my head, really stupid screw-ups on the Robot Master also contributing. I rate Buster Rod G as a 5 out of 10. Certainly not easy, mainly due to the 2 screens I've talked about fairly at length by now, but certainly not one of the hardest ones. 5 out of 10 seems to be consistent with other stages that took around an hour to beat, with a similar number of outtakes. So we're now 2/3 of the way through this perfect run series, with just Mega Water S left to deal with. Can I perfect run him? And if so, how easy or difficult was it? You'll find out next time. Cheerio.